أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الذي لا يبلغ مدحته القائلون ولا يوصينا معه العادون ولا يؤدي حقه المجتهدون الذي لا يدركه بهد الهمم ولا يناله غوث الفتن الذي ليس لصفته حد محدود ولا نعت موجود ولا وقت محدود ولا أجل ممدود فترى الخلائق بقدرته ونشر الرياح برحمته ووتد بالسخر ميدان عرض ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وحبيبنا وحبيب رب العالمين أبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين واللعن على أعدائهم أجمعين من أول يوم ظلمهم إلى قيام يوم الدين أما بعد فقال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه المبين وقوله الحق بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وكذلك أثرنا عليهم ليعلموا أن وعد الله حق وأن الساعة لا ريب فيها إذ يتنازعون بينهم أمرهم فقالوا ابنوا عليهم بنيانا ربهم أعلم بهم قال الذين غلبوا على أمرهم لنتخذن عليهم مسجدا. Sadaqallahul Aliyyul Azim. Dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The lecture for tonight will deal with the desecration of Jannat-Ul-Baqi, which happened in 1925, and we'll go over some of the reasons that the Wahhabi school of thought, when they came into power, they decided to destroy and demolish everything, all the mausoleums that were built in Jannat-Ul-Baqi. But the verse of the Quran that I started off this lecture with, Surah Al-Kahf, verse number 21, it itself from the Quran, it negates, or it's proof that the reasoning that the Wahhabis use to desecrate and demolish Jannat al-Baqi is not part of the Quran. The Quran itself testifies against to their reasoning. So to begin with, Jannat al-Baqi, for the youngsters who are not aware, Jannat al-Baqi is a much revered graveyard located where? In Madinat al-Munawwara, in present day Saudi Arabia. Many great personalities of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim assalam are laid to rest there. Lady Hazrat Fatima Zahra salawatullah laha, the Prophet's daughter, she's there. His grandson Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba alayhi salam, he's buried in Jannatul Baqi. Imam Zainul Abidin alayhi salam, Imam Ahmad Baqir alayhi salam, Imam Jafar Sadiq alayhi salam, they are all buried in Jannatul Baqi. In addition to the successors and the Ahlul Bayt al-Islam of the Holy Prophet, prominent and famous companions of the Holy Prophet and his other close relatives were also buried in Jannat al-Baqi, and their graves were also adorned with mausoleums and tombs, like not as big as the tombs that you see today with Amir al-Mu'mineen or Imam Hussein al-Islam or in Samra Kazmain. No, but they had smaller tombs on top of their graves. And apart from these holy personalities, graves of approximately 7,000 famous companions of the Holy Prophet are located in Baqi. Similarly, many scholars of the early days of Islam are also buried there. For example, Imam Malik, the founder of the Maliki school of thought, he is buried in Jannat al-Baqi. And like with other graves, a tomb was also built over his grave. Even today, Muslims, they have preserved pictures of the tombs, and these pictures, you can see them. They're available anywhere on the internet. And these tombs, these mausoleums, they were present until when? 8th of Shawwal, 1925, when King Abdul Saud ordered them to be demolished. In the same year, 1925, the Wahhabis, they not only demolished Jannat al-Baqi, no. The Wahhabis, they demolished the tombs of the holy personalities at Jannat-Ul-Mu'alla, which is in Mecca. Many people have heard of Jannat-Ul-Baqi, but they haven't heard of Jannat-Ul-Mu'alla. Please remember, the same thing that happened in Jannat-Ul-Baqi was the exact same thing that happened in Jannat-Ul-Mu'alla. Jannat-Ul-Baqi is famous, yes, but in Jannat-Ul-Mu'alla, there are also great personalities that are buried there. For example, the Holy Prophet's mother, she is buried in Jannat-Ul-Mu'alla. The wife that he loved the most, the very first wife of the Holy Prophet that he loved the most, Lady Khadija salawatullahi alayha, where is she buried? Jannatul Mu'alla. The grandfather of the Holy Prophet and other ancestors of the Holy Prophet, they're buried where? In Jannatul Mu'alla. But because we're dealing with Jannatul Baqi, we'll speak about Jannatul Baqi for tonight. Al-Baqi, literally Al-Baqi means a tree garden. And it's known as Jannatul Baqi. Meaning what? Jannat means what? Jannat means heaven. Jannat-Ul-Baqi, the heavenly garden. Why is it known as Jannat-Ul-Baqi? Due to its sanctity, since in it are buried many of the Prophet's relatives and companions. The first companion to be buried in Al-Baqi was a man or a companion by the name of Uthman ibn Mat'un, who died on the 3rd of Shaban in the 3rd year of Hijrah. The Holy Prophet ordered certain trees to be planted, and in the midst he buried his dear companion, placing 2 stones over the grave. And on the following years, the Prophet's son Ibrahim alayhi salam, who passed away in his infancy, and who over whom the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he cried, he wept very much. He was also buried where? In Jannat-Ul-Baqi. After this, the people of Medina then began to use that site for the burial of their own dead. Why? Because the Holy Prophet used to greet those who were buried in Al-Baqi by saying what? By saying, "Peace be upon you, O abode of the faithful. God willing, we should soon join you. Ya Allah, forgive the fellows of Al-Baqi." The Holy Prophet, he used to pray for the people that were buried in Jannat-Ul-Baqi. Ya Allah, forgive the fellows of Al-Baqi. And what happened gradually, the site of the burial ground of Al-Baqi, it was gradually extended. And a Muslim traveler by the name of Umar ibn Jubair, he describes Al-Baqi as it was back then, before 1925. When he traveled to Medina, he says what? He says that Al-Baqi is situated to the east of Medina. You enter it through the gate known as the gate of Al-Baqi. As you enter, the first grave you see on your left is that of Safiya, the Prophet's aunt. And further still, when you go, is the grave of Malik ibn Anas, the Imam of Medina. On his grave is raised a small dome. So there was a small dome that was built on top of the grave of who? Malik ibn Anas. Meaning the people of that time, when they buried Malik ibn Anas, they didn't think it was bid'ah to make a small dome over his grave. But when did this bid'ah start? Or when did it start becoming called bid'ah? Is when Al Saud and the Wahhabis took over. But he goes on to say that in front of his grave is the grave of Ibrahim, the son of the Holy Prophet, with a white dome over it, and next to it on the right is the grave of Abdul Rahman, son of Umar bin Khattab, and facing it are the graves of Aqil bin Abi Talib and Abdullah ibn Jafar Tayyab. There, facing those graves, is a small shrine containing the graves of the Prophet's wives, followed by a shrine of Abbas ibn Abdul Muttalib. The grave of Hassan bin Ali, the grandson of the Holy Prophet, is situated near the gate to its right hand, as an elevated dome, and has an elevated dome over it. Meaning what? Meaning that the grave of Imam Hassan alayhi salam, it also had a dome over it. And he goes on to say that his head lies at the feet of Abbas ibn Abdul Muttalib, and both graves are raised high above the ground. Their walls are paneled with yellow plates and studded with beautiful sharpened nails. Meaning what? Meaning that their graves, there was a mausoleum built around their graves. And he goes on to say that this is how the grave of Ibrahim, the son of the Prophet, has also been adorned. Behind the shrine of Abbas, there is the house attributed to Lady Fatima, daughter of the Holy Prophet. And inshallah, we'll get back to this house, when it was built, why it was built. Because one of the reasonings that Wahhabis used in 1925 to demolish the mausoleums of Al-Baqi was what? Was that this land is specific to the general Muslim Ummah. And these things, what do they do? This land is waqf for this general Ummah. And what do these things do? These things, these mausoleums and these domes, they take up space. And isn't it haram? We'll get to how those questions were posed. But this traveler, he goes on to say that behind the shrine of Abbas, there is a house attributed to Fatima, the daughter of the Holy Prophet, known as Baytul Ahzan, the house of grief, because it is the house she used to frequent, or she used to always go to, in order to mourn the death of her father, the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. At the furthest end of Al-Baqi is the grave of Uthman, the third Khalifa, with a small dome over it. And there next to it is the grave of Fatima bint Asad, the mother of Ali ibn Abi Talib al-Islam. So over the centuries, Al-Baqi, it remained a sacred site, with renovations being carried out as and when needed. Until when? Until the Wahhabis rose to power in the early 19th century. These Wahhabis, they desecrated the tombs and demonstrated disrespect to the Shuhada and the companions of the Holy Prophet that were buried in Al-Baqi. And Muslims who disagreed with them were branded as infidels and were consequently killed. The Wahhabis, they believed that visiting the graves and the shrines of the prophets, the imams, or the saints was a form of what? Idolatry, and totally un-Islamic. Those who did not conform with their belief were killed and their property was confiscated. From 1790 to 1802, the Wahhabis, they made several attempts to gain a foothold in Hijaz, but they failed. But finally, in 1802, they emerged victorious, where they spilled the innocent blood of Muslims. In 1803, they entered Mecca and they destroyed all the sacred places and domes that were there, including the one which served as a canopy over the Zamzam well. In 1806, the Wahhabis, they entered Medina to desecrate Al-Baqi, as well as every mosque they came across. An attempt in that year was even made to demolish the Prophet's tomb, but for one reason or another, the idea was abandoned. And in the years after, Muslims from Iraq, from Syria, from Egypt, they were refused entry into Mecca for Hajj. Why? Because King Saud, Lanatullah alayhi, he set a precondition that those who wish to perform the pilgrimage would have to accept Wahhabism, or else they would be branded as non-Muslims, becoming ineligible for entry into the Haram. Al-Baqi was razed to the ground with no sign of any grave or tomb whatsoever. But the Saudis, they were still not quite satisfied with doing any of that. No, the king ordered attendance at the Prophet's shrine to show him where the treasure of valuable gifts were stored. And the Wahhabis, they plundered the treasure for their own use. Thousands of Muslims fled Mecca and Medina in a bid to save their lives and escape from the mounting pressure and persecution at the hands of the Wahhabis. And Muslims from all over the world denounced this Saudi savagery and exhorted the Caliphate of the Ottoman Empire to save the sacred shrines from total destruction. Then, as it's known, Muhammad Ali Bashar attacked Hijaz, and with the support of local tribes, what happened? He managed to restore law and order in Medina and Mecca, dislodging Al Saud. And at that time, this entire Muslim world, it celebrated this victory with great joy. In Cairo, they say that the celebrations continued for 5 days. No doubt the joy was due to the fact that pilgrims were once more allowed freely to go to Hajj, and the sacred shrines were once again restored. These Wahhabis, they said what? That if you're not a Wahhabi, you're not a Muslim. If you're not a Muslim, you're not allowed in Mecca. You're not allowed for the Hajj. In 1818, the Ottoman Khalifa Abdul Majid and his successors Khalif Abdul Hamid and Muhammad, they carried out the reconstruction of all of the sacred places, restoring the Islamic heritage at all of those important sites. In 1848 and 1860, further renovations were made at the expense of thousands, hundreds of thousands of pounds. What does this tell you about what these Wahhabis did? 1848, hundreds of thousands, 700,000 pounds, 800,000 pounds. And these donations, where did they come from? They came from the donations that were collected in the Prophet's tomb. That Ottoman Empire, they added to the splendor of Medina and Mecca by building religious structures of great beauty and architecture. Richard Burton, a Westerner who visited the Holy Shrine in 1853, disguised as Afghan Muslim and adopting the name of Abdullah, he speaks of Medina boasting 55 mosques and holy shrines. And another English adventurer who visited Medina in 1877 and 78 described it as a small, beautiful city resembling Istanbul. He writes about its white walls, golden, slender minarets, and green fields. And in 1924, Wahhabis, they entered Hijaz for a second time and carried out another merciless plunder and massacre. People in streets were killed, houses were razed to the ground, women and children, they weren't spared either. In 1925, when the Saudi family gained complete control of Mecca, Medina and its neighborhood, they decided to wipe out the signs of these holy places, Jannat-Ul-Baqi, Jannat-Al-Mu'alla. The companions and the family of the Holy Prophet, they decided to wipe these persons from the map. For this, what did they need? They obtained rulings from the scholars of Medina to make it easy for themselves and to gain support of the people of Hijaz who were previously not ready for their rule. And to do this, what did Al Saud do? Al Saud, they dispatched the chief justice. His name was Sulaiman bin Bulayhar. They dispatched this chief justice so that he could obtain the desired rulings from the scholars of Medina. And for this, he posed questions to the scholars of Medina in such a manner that the answers, they were already in the question. The questions themselves were loaded. They were loaded as to the Wahhabi viewpoint. And what did the muftis do? They were informed beforehand to respond with the desired answer, or they would be declared kafir and they would be killed. The muftis, they were scared for their life. The questions and answers, they were published in a Mecca-based magazine, Al-Qur'a, in Shawwal of 1925. And what were these questions? Question number one was, what do the scholars of Medina, what do the scholars of Medina have to say? Is it permissible to construct a structure and mosque over graves? One. Two, if it's not permissible, look at the way the questions are formulated. If it is not permissible and Islam strongly prohibits it, then is it wajib, is it obligatory to demolish them and stop Muslims from praying in those sites? 2. 3. Can graves, structures and tombs constructed on an endowed land like Baqi, whose some parts are not useful, considered as usurped? This is the question that I referred to in the beginning of the lecture. Can graves, structures and tombs constructed on an endowed land like Baqi, whose some of these parts are not useful, considered as usurped, should not they be demolished at the earliest to do away with the oppression perpetrated on the deserving ones? These were the three questions that they would put to their muftis, and you can tell that the answer that they were looking for is already loaded within the question. The muftis, out of fear for their own lives or greed for governmental posts and money, told the Chief Justice what he wanted to hear, that it is haram to build these mausoleums. So in that same year, in 1925, before the Wahhabis attacked Jannat-Ul-Baqi, they attacked the graveyard of Mecca, Jannat-Ul-Mu'alla, and they razed it to the ground. What did they use to justify what they were doing? They used some traditions that are found in Sunni books, such as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has cursed the Jews and the Christians for adopting the graves of their prophets as masjids, or place of worship. Do not make my grave a place of worship. This is a narration found in Sunni books. 1. 2. The Christians have chosen the place where their saints are buried as objects of worship. You should not do as they do. 2. 3. Do not glorify me as the Christians glorify Nabiullah Isa alayhi salam. 3. These were the traditions that they used to justify why Jannat-Ul-Baqi and Jannat-Ul-Mu'alla needed to be destroyed. And the questions put forth, we just went over them. Even if these traditions are authentic, they do not in any way repeal the permissibility of worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala near or on the grave of a chosen servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All they do is they warn the people not to treat the servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala like the Lord to whom they had submitted unconditionally in their lives. Meaning what? Meaning that these narrations, all they do is tell the people, warn the people not to treat the servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as if like they're Allah. Na'uzubillah. The place where a chosen servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is buried becomes a sacred place, which makes the worshipper of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala remember Allah in a more favorable and spiritual environment than anywhere else. There is no restriction on the devotees. There is no restriction on the people that are devoted to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to avoid any blessed place for His worship. In order to save the Muslims from committing shirk, it has been made wajib to recite tashahhud in every salat. Tashahhud in every salat. Why? To save the Muslims from committing shirk. There is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is His servant. Ashhadu anna Muhammadan abdahu wa rasuluh. 5 times a day, the Muslims, they say that the Holy Prophet is what? The Abd, the servant and messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's no possibility of adopting any created being as an object of worship besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when a Muslim repeats tashahhud in every salat, which makes it even more clear that even the Holy Prophet and his Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, even though they have the highest status, are created beings. Therefore, there is no equal to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and He alone is the sole object of worship. The reasoning they use, the 3 narrations that they use, the 1, 2, 3 narrations that they use, even if they're to be true, no one worships those graves. The Quran itself, it gives permission to remember the chosen servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as sincere worshippers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to pay homage to them, bowing and prostrating before them as the angels were commanded to prostrate, do sajda before Hazrat Adam alayhi salam. Surah Al-Baqarah verse number 34. Or how the family of Hazrat Yusuf alayhi salam, they did sajda before or to Hazrat Yusuf alayhi salam. Surah Yusuf verse number 100. It is not prohibited because worship, ibadah, depends on intention. And the intention of a true Muslim can never be worship of these created beings. Why? Because a true Muslim worships only and only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If we go and we worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala where? In Najaf, underneath the tomb, or by the tomb of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Are we worshipping Amir al-Mu'mineen? No. We're reading the same prayer that is being read in Medina. When we read prayer underneath the Qubbah of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein al-Islam, are we worshipping Abu Abdullah al-Hussein al-Islam? No, we're not. We're reading the same prayer that is read in Medina. We're reading the same prayer that is read in Mecca. What is astounding, what's astounding is if you ask the Muslims, where is Nabiullah Ismail al-Islam buried? Where is Nabiullah Ismail al-Islam buried? In Mecca. Where in Mecca? In the Haram. Where in the Haram? Where in the Haram? Right by the Kaaba. Right by the Kaaba. Every year in the time of Hajj, when you have thousands, millions, 2 million, 3 million, 4 million, however many million people praying over there, are they praying to the grave of Nabiullah Ismail al-Islam? Are they worshipping the grave of Nabiullah Ismail al-Islam? No. What did the Wahhabis do? They have no answer. The grave of Nabiullah Ismail al-Islam is over there right by the Kaaba. Muslims, when you're in Mecca, in the Haram, which way are the Muslims facing? The Kaaba is right here in the middle. The Muslims are all facing towards the Kaaba. So it's a circle, is it not? Yes. So you'll always have one side where the grave of Hazrat Ismail alayhi salam would be in front of the people that are praying. Are these people praying to Hazrat Ismail alayhi salam? No. Is their namaz batil? No. Why? Because intention. Their intention is that they're praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Their intention isn't that they're praying to Nabiullah Ismail alayhi salam, or their intention isn't that they're praying to Baytullah, the Kaaba. They're not praying to the Kaaba. They're praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Holy Prophet himself, he used to go visit that graveyard. Where? Jannat-Ul-Mu'alla first. The very first graveyard that the Wahhabis, they destroyed, Jannat-Ul-Mu'alla. The Holy Prophet used to go visit that graveyard, where his great-grandfather Abdul Manaf, grandfather Abdul Muttalib, uncle Abu Talib, and wife Lady Khadija, salawatullah, they're all buried. There was a mausoleum and tomb on each of their graves. And the Wahhabis, they demolished all of them before turning their eyes to Medina. And not only did they just demolish these graves, no. Any Muslim that said anything against them, they were all wiped out. Muslims were martyred in skirmishes against the Wahhabis. And they did not stop at the killing. They made sure to plunder the mausoleums afterwards. Whenever the Wahhabis attacked the holy places, they not only killed the Muslim men, women, and children and the elderly, but also plundered the streets and markets and escaped with abundant wealth. And the historians, they have documented that the Wahhabis, they looted 40 trunks of diamonds, ornaments, and rubies, and nearly 100 swords with pure gold sheets laden with diamonds and rubies from the mausoleums of Al-Baqi in Medina. Trunks. It was the 8th of Shawwal, 1925. Under the commandship of whom? Abdul Aziz bin Saud, lanatullah alayh. The Wahhabis, they surrounded Medina and fought its defenders and evicted the officials of the Ottoman government out of Medina. And then they went on to destroy the graves of Imam Hassan alayhi salam, Imam Zainul Abidin alayhi salam, Imam Muhammad Baqir alayhi salam, Imam Jafar Sadiq alayhi salam. Brothers and sisters, the Islamic Ummah doesn't believe in Imam Zainul Abidin alayhi salam. The majority of Muslims, they don't believe in Imam Zainul Abidin alayhi salam. They don't believe in Imam Ahmad Baqir al-Islam. Imam Jafar Sadiq al-Islam, some do, but not as Imam, the way that we Shias believe him as Imam, no. But does the Islamic Ummah not believe Imam Hassan al-Islam as the grandson of the Holy Prophet? But the grave whose demolishment should have had the whole Islamic Ummah up in arms should have been when they desecrated the grave of Lady Zahra salawatullah alayha. Why? Ya Fatima, whoever displeases you displeases me, and whoever displeases me displeases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whoever angers you angers me, and whoever angers me angers Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. 1400 years ago, Lady Zahra salawatullah alayha was not allowed to live peacefully, and she was buried in the dark. 1400 years later, she wasn't allowed to rest peacefully, and she was still buried in the dark. The verse of the Quran which I started this lecture off with, it talks about Ashab al-Kahf, and I'm sure people are aware of the story of the people of the cave, but right now this isn't the time to get into that story. But at the end of that story, what happens, verse number 21, it talks about what happened. The people of the cave, they wake up at 300 years later, 315 years later, however long it was, they wake up after that time. They go to the city, they find out that the city is completely changed, and they find out that they've been sleeping for that long. And when they come back, or when one of the person comes back who's gone to the city, he tells everyone else. And what happens? Everyone else, they ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to put them back to rest. And at the same time, there were people, the king of that time, with his people that had come to see it for themselves. So at the end, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He talks about what happened at the end, and He says, what? وَكَذَلِكَ أَثَرْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ لِيَعْلَمُوا أَنَّ وَعْدَ اللَّهِ حَقٌّ وَأَنَّ السَّاعَةَ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهَا. He says, thus did we make their case known to the people, that they might know that the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is true, and there can be no doubt about the hour of judgment. It goes on to say that, behold, they dispute amongst themselves as to their affair, meaning the people of the cave. Some said, construct a building over them. Construct a building over them. Their Lord knows best about them. Those who prevailed over their affairs said, let us surely build a place of worship over them. What did the people, the Muslims of that time do? The ones that were known as Muslims of that time. That's Habakaf. There were people that believed in Nabila Isa alayhi salam to be the prophet. 300 years later, after they woke up, Christianity of that time, it had prevailed. So what did those Muslims of that time do? They said, let us surely build a place of worship over them. The Quran has not denounced building places of worship over saints of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No, the Quran clearly in verse 21, there's no denouncement of what these people are doing. These people are building a place to worship who? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not Ashab Kahf. The same way these people that built all of these places, these mausoleums over, or these tombs over these personalities, they did not build them because these personalities were to be worshipped. No. When you see these personalities, who do you think about? You think about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you would worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One of the questions that they put forth was what? One of the three questions that they put forth was, can grave structures and tombs constructed on this endowed land? When was this land endowed? When was the land endowed? The Holy Prophet, he buried his companion there. And after that, people just started burying their dead there. The Wahhabis, they said that these structures, what did they do? They take up space on this endowed land. And because they're taking up space, it's usurping someone else's right. When was this land endowed to begin with? One. Two, the third Khalifa, or before the third Khalifa, when Lady Zahra salawatullah anha, when Hazrat Zahra salawatullah anha, when she would cry, the people of Medina, they complained to Amir al-Mu'mineen, and she told Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ya Ali, I want you to do me a favor, build me a little hut in Medina where I can go, a little building in Medina, a little hut in Medina where I can go and I can cry over my father. I can cry over my father. This was when? Right after the Holy Prophet had passed away, right after the Holy Prophet left this world. Baytul Ahzan, the house of sorrow. This house was built by whom? Amir al-Mu'mineen. Where was it built? Jannat-Ul-Baqi. I'm sorry, did Amir al-Mu'mineen not know that this place was waqf and it's not a place where you could build something like this? These Wahhabis now, 1400 years later, know better than Amir al-Mu'mineen? Maybe they have animosity towards Amir al-Mu'mineen, no problem, okay, they hate Amir al-Mu'mineen. This house was built in whose time? Who was the Khalifa of that time? Abu Bakr. Abu Bakr didn't have this demolished for that reasoning. Umar didn't have this demolished for that reasoning. Uthman didn't have this demolished for that reasoning. Did they not stop and think, hold on a second, we have these narrations, this building, Baytul Ahzan, where Lady Zahra sallallahu used to go cry. This shouldn't exist here. Did they not think about this? Now 1400 years later, you have Wahhabis that somehow they know better. They know Islam better than the companions that live with the Holy Prophet. Before all of these places were demolished, the travelers, they said what? They said that over the grave of Uthman, there was what? A mausoleum built, a tomb built. This tomb, for these tombs, lasted when? All the way until the Wahhabis came. Baytul Ahzan lasted from the Caliphate of Abu Bakr all the way until the Wahhabis came. None of the Khalifas, none of the people that usurped the right of the Ahlul Bayt at that time, none of those Khalifas, they said that this is wrong. None of them said that. Now you have Wahhabis that seem to know Islam better than the companion of the Holy Prophet, that seem to know Islam better than, forget the companions, no, the Khalifas themselves. These Wahhabis, they seem to know the Islam better than the Khalifas. They came up with this reasoning that it's taking away someone else's right. Abu Bakr didn't think it was taking away anyone's right. Umar didn't think it was taking away anyone's right. Amir al-Mu'mineen didn't think it was taking anyone's right. But like I said, brothers and sisters, what was this for? The animosity that these people had for who? For the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. 1400 years ago, Hazrat Zahra salawatullah, she was not allowed to live peacefully. 1400 years later, she wasn't allowed to rest peacefully. And brothers and sisters, there are only a few personalities Only a few personalities whose masa'ib start when they were children. Lady Zahra, Shahzadi Zahra's masa'ib, they start at the age of 5. Hazrat Zainab salawatullahi starts at the age of 5, 6. Hazrat Kulthum at the age of 3. Hazrat Sakina at the age of 5. Sallallahu alayka ya Rasulallah. Sallallahu alayka ya Amir al-Mu'mineen. Sallallahu alayki ya Siddiqatu Fatima. Sallallahu alayka ya Hasan al-Mujtaba. Sallallahu alayka ya Gharib al-Ghuraba. Ya Aba Abdullah al-Hussein. Oh, Azadar of Taht al-Bayt, let's go to Medina. There's a house, and there's smoke coming from that house. And this house isn't an ordinary house. No, this is the house of the Ahl al-Bayt alayhimus salam. This smoke isn't the smoke of a stove that is being lit. It's the smoke of that door being burnt in front of which the Holy Prophet used to say salam 7 times a day. And when that door was set on fire and kicked on top of Hazrat Zahra salawatullahi anha, there was a nail hammered into that door on which Amir al-Mu'mineen used to hang his armor. The narrations, they state that that nail struck Hazrat Zahra and up to 50 people walked through that door. When the enemies, they tied up Imam Ali alayhi salam with rope and dragged him out of the house, a 4-year-old girl was trying to pick up the door. Hazrat Zahra salawatullahi anha, she had fainted, and when she regains consciousness, she asked, Ya Fizzata, Ain al-Ali? Oh Fizza, tell me where's Ali? Fizza, she replies, Ya Zahra, they have tied Maula Ali in ropes and they're dragging him to the masjid. Hazrat Zahra, she shouts out, O people, leave Ali alone. And when the enemies don't comply, she goes behind them and grabs Imam Ali alayhi salam's shirt from the back. As they dragged Imam Ali alayhi salam, Hazrat Zahra was also being dragged. And when the enemies couldn't pull the weight, one of the enemies, they strike Hazrat Zahra and she falls to the ground. She cries out, O people, if you don't let go of Ali, I swear to God, I will take off my rida, raise my hands to the skies, and I will curse all of you. Salman Farsi, he says that I saw with my own eyes that the walls of the masjid, they were starting to rise up and the curse of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is about to descend. Mullah Ali alayhi salam, he tells Salman to tell Hazrat Zahra to not curse them. One day, when Hazrat Zahra was remembering her father and weeping over her separation from him, the people of Medina, they complained to Imam Ali about her crying. Ali alayhi salam, they go and they tell Imam Ali, Ya Ali, please tell Fatima to Zahra to either cry in the daytime or cry at night. Ali alayhi salam, he comes and he tells her, O bint Rasul, the people of Medina, they have complained against you, saying that either cry in the daytime or cry at night. Fatima Zahra salawatullahi anha, she replies, Ya Ali, tell the people of Medina that the daughter of the Prophet will not bother them any longer. Ya Ali, I have a favor to ask you, which is that you build me a small building in Jannat-Ul-Baqi so that I may cry over my father. Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, what does he do? He goes and he builds that little hut for Lady Zahra salawatullahi anha, and that is where Hazrat Zahra, she used to go and she used to weep over her father. One day what happens? When Amir al-Mu'mineen, he comes back home from the masjid, he sees that Hazrat Zahra salawatullahi anha, she's smiling. He hadn't seen her smile ever since the departure of the Holy Prophet. So what does Amir al-Mu'mineen do? He asked, Ya bint Rasul, what is it that makes you smile? And as Zahra sallallahu anha, she says, Ya Ali, I will tell you, but first, tell my sons, tell your sons Hassan and Hussein to go to greet their grandfather Rasulullah, and tell Fizza to come and take Kulthum and Lady Zainab sallallahu anha. Well, Amir al-Mu'mineen, he tells Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein to go to do the ziyarat of their grandfather, and he tells Fizza to take them to Riyaz. Oh, bint Rasul, what is it that makes you smile? And that's when Hazrat Zahra, she says, Ya Ali, last night when I was crying over the grave of my father, or when I was crying over my father, he came to me in a dream and he told me, oh my daughter dear, soon you will come to me, you will be the first of the Ahlul Bayt to come to me. Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Ya Allah, I ask you to please forgive our sins. Forgive the sins of all of the Murhumeen, Mu'mineen, Mu'minat that do not have anyone to pray on their behalf. Ya Allah, I ask you first and foremost, to keep the Imam of our time safe, make his reappearance as soon as possible, and let him come and take vengeance for what Ahl Saud have done to Baqi and Jannat-Ul-Mu'alla and Jannat-Ul-Baqi. Let him come and take vengeance for all of the atrocities that Ahl Saud have done in the name of Islam. Ya Allah, I ask you, as soon as possible, Ya Allah, destroy Al Saud and everything that they stand for. This Islam that Al Saud proclaimed, this is the Islam of Banu Umayyah. Ya Allah, I ask you, in the name of those holy five, to get rid of that part or that get rid of that form of Islam completely, and anyone that follows that form of Islam, get rid of all of them from the face of the earth. Ya Allah, I ask you to forgive our sins, forgive the sins of our parents, forgive the sins of all those mu'mineen, mu'minat that are listening to these lectures in these nights. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Please, brothers and sisters, tonight's Thursday night, recite a Surah Fatiha for the marhumeen whose names were on the wall in Babulilm. Recite Surah Fatiha for your own marhumeen, and recite a Surah Fatiha for all of those mu'mineen, marhumeen that do not have anyone to recite on their behalf. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Bismillah. Bismillah. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى اللهم صل على محمد وعلى اللهم صل على محمد wassalamu alaikum wassalam. Brothers and sisters, inshallah, I will see you all again soon.